Now they will know why they are afraid of the dark. Now they will learn why they fear the night.
In an age of blockbusters, audiences were gripped by fear. Fear of the unknown. Fear of the obscure. Until one man showed them there was nothing to fear. Cinephobia. Welcome, creeps and ghouls, to another episode of the Cinephobia podcast, an extension of the YouTube channel Cinephobia, your home for all things cinema and scary. I'm your creeptastic host, JP. Our guests on the show today are Vicky Solorio, average achiever.
Hey.
Our next guest is Jesus Pinedo, filmmaker and horror fan. Thanks for being on the show, Jesus.
Thank you for having me.
And our last guest is Estella Robinson, podcast enthusiast. Thanks for being on, Estella.
Thank you.
So this episode, we're talking about a TV show inspired by comic books, but no, it's not DC or Marvel. We're talking about the only kind of comics I really like, and that's horror comics, especially those published by EC in the 40s and 50s, such as Tales from the Crypt, The Vault of Horror, and The Haunt of Fear. These same comics provided the inspiration for the 1982 George Romero Stephen King collaboration Creepshow, the 1987 follow-up film Creepshow 2, and the straight-to-DVD third film, which from here on out, we'll just pretend didn't exist. That's right, folks, we're talking about the revival of Creepshow. This time is a TV show helmed by makeup FX wizard turned director and producer, now showrunner Greg Nicotero, currently available on the Shudder streaming service. The series has 6 episodes altogether for this first season, with 2 horror stories per episode. The series premiered on September 26, 2019. Principal photography for the series began in February in Atlanta, Georgia. And unlike the film entries, the Creepshow series features several directors instead of just one. Directors include John Harrison, Greg Nicotero, and Tom Savini, all 3 having worked on the first 2 Creepshow features. Now let's get right into it. The first one was Gray Matter and the House of the Head, and the second one was Bad Wolf Down and The Finger. First off, what was your favorite Creepshow movie, Estella?
Creepshow 2 definitely was my favorite one.
And what was your favorite segment between the 2 films?
I mean, there was 3 of them, but it's kind of hard for me to choose, because I think The Raft and Thanks for the Ride Lady are tied for my number 1. Because The Wrath was really good, and the just thanks for the ride, lady.
Thanks for the ride, lady.
It makes it like a really enjoyable story.
Vicky, it's on you now. Moment of truth. Favorite Creepshow movie and favorite Creepshow segment.
Well, you reminded me of the Leslie Nielsen one, and I also like The Raft, but I'll have to go with the first Creepshow one for the sake of Leslie Nielsen having to get revenge on his ex-wife or his unfaithful wife.
Good call.
And I thought about that because I do like Leslie Nielsen. He's always just brings a good show, and it hit me. I was like, oh yeah, I remember that one. That was pretty good. Besides The Raft from Creepshow 2, but I'll go with Creepshow 1. The segment, what's it called?
Something to Tide You Over.
Yes.
Very good call. Everybody loves them some Leslie Nielsen. Last and not least, Jesus. Moment of truth. Favorite Creepshow film and favorite Creepshow segment.
That's really hard. Right before we saw the series, you were asking me that question. I gave you like an answer to that, but now I kind of changed my mind, and now I think the Crate would probably be my favorite one.
Ah,
Probably because I saw it at 6. I saw Creepshow when I was 6 years old, and I think that was the segment that scared me the most. Just scared the bejesus out of me. The most creative one out of all the original 4 in the first movie. Just the notion of this guy who, he hates his wife, and he fantasizes about killing her and stuff, and then he finally finds this opportunity to do it and, feeds his wife to this monster that's been inside this crate for years.
great cast. Hal
Yeah.
Holbrook and Adrienne Barbeau.
Yeah, who was also in the show, right?
She was
Yeah.
in the first episode of the show, Gray Matter.
Yeah.
Now, talking about the show, do you think that the show lives up to the films?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I had my doubts because I wasn't too keen on the first story that we saw. Yeah, but the second one, what was the name of that one?
That was The House of the Head.
The House of the Head. That one.
I think that was also the name of a porno film I saw recently.
But yeah, that one. After that one, I realized that shit, the show's pretty much living up to the spirit of the original 2 films, at least in my opinion. Yeah, I feel like we're in a place where like anthology series are making a really great comeback. We had the Twilight Zone recently that came out, and now we have this here. So I'm really glad to see that horror is getting the respect it deserves, rightfully so, on these streaming platforms where we can actually watch these and reminisce about the good old anthology series in the old days.
Like Tales from the Dark Side,
yeah.
Tales from the Crypt show that we had back in the day. They were supposed to do a
M. Night
reboot.
Shyamalan was going to do a reboot on it.
He was doing a reboot, but I don't know what happened with that.
Lawsuits and stuff. I guess he didn't have the right to use the series or anything. I don't know what happened there. It just didn't happen.
He was going to do it with TNT, and something happened. I'm not really sure.
There was even a trailer. I recall that there was a trailer that was
There
released.
was.
Yeah.
I don't know. But we got Creepshow now, so good for us. Vicky, do you think that the show lived up to the movies?
Oh yeah, definitely. And I feel like definitely because of like what Creepshow came out in like the 80s and 90s. The first one and the second one.
First one 82, second one 87.
Oh, both 80s. Like, since both 80s, like makeup and like special effects has gotten so much better. So it's like even though it still has that same essence from like the 80s and 90s, there's more detail to it. So that's what like immediately just surpasses it. Story wise, it's still good. It still has that same tone as the first 2. But I feel like imagery-wise, it definitely it's definitely exceeded my expectations. I was like, oh, it'll probably be like so-so because it's on Shudder, and yeah, it has some names to it, but it's funding. People don't watch horror as much, but definitely I was definitely like, wow, these are good, and I'm excited to see the next 2 episodes. If you're a fan of Creepshow, it definitely meets your expectations.
Absolutely, and it seems like a lot of people have liked it so far. It's got a lot of great reception, so I wouldn't be surprised if there's a season 2. What was your favorite episode between the first 2 ones that we watched, and what was your favorite segment between the 2? Now, the first one was Gray Matter in the House of the Head, and the second one was Bad Wolf Down with the Nazis and the werewolf, and the last one was The Finger.
My favorite one would have to be The House of the Head, but it's also a tie with The Finger because it was just funny. It was like comedically funny and weird, but also gross.
Yeah.
I wish I could compare them, but I just feel like they were just too different. They were 2 different stories, but I'll definitely go with The House of the Head because that was just interesting how they shot it, and it was just the suspense.
It was very
I'm
well
just
done.
a person of suspense, so it's like I was definitely into it. Like, what's gonna happen with this family of figurines, right? Their figurines are not like technically dolls, so it's like, yeah, what's gonna happen? And the way the camera like followed each room, and you didn't know, and it was just with a flashlight like that too, just to add the extra suspense of like, oh, what's going to happen? And so I think The House of the Head, and then the second one would have to be The Finger.
The Finger. Hitting it out the park this first season so far. Estella, it's on to you now. Do you think that the show lived up to the hype?
Yeah, I definitely think that it lived up to the hype of the movies. I have to agree with Vicky, like she said. It being 2019 versus those being made in the 80s, they could make it look a lot different, and they did do that with, better graphics and stuff like that. But I still think they kind of made it look like that 80s type show. Just the way that they styled it, and they really, went along with how the movies did. All the shows were really good, and they weren't just, gory. It kept with the same kind of corny humor in some of the stories, but, creepiness and suspense and just all around a good show.
Was there a standout segment to you between the 2 episodes that we watched?
I actually agree exactly with Vicky again. That what is it? House of the Head.
The House of the Head.
That one was just really good. I was like, oh my god, I was about to call the dog over there to sit on the couch with me. So I'm like, this is scary. The look of horror on the little doll family's faces, you really felt how afraid they were, and it made you feel afraid. And just when the little heads were chopped off, it just looked so, it was really scary. And then also The Finger too, because I'm like, okay, wow, was that legit, or was the guy just batshit crazy and he invented this whole story in his head to justify, killing people who wronged him? But I also did what was the third?
There was Gray Matter, and then there was Bad Wolf Down.
Bad Wolf Down. That one was definitely really good. And I agree with Jesus. Gray Matter was my least favorite.
I just think it had less story. There was we knew something was building up, but it felt a little flat. I don't know.
I agree.
It wasn't Bad Wolf Down where you kind of know where the stories are gonna end, but like each one had a good build up to it. But I feel like with that one, maybe it was just like not much happening. We're just seeing a slow progression of the father in the first step in the first story.
Yeah, and the whole time it's just like the son buying him beer, like, okay, let's get on, you know.
So that's why it was still good, but it was just like the flattest.
Right.
So
Jesus, what was your favorite segment?
I can say the same. It's the House of the Head, and
that was good.
I think that one was probably the most suspenseful out of all of them. Like, you legitimately feel the fear, and I don't know, there's just something eerie about dolls, you know. Just the fact that, I mean, honestly, I was thinking like that was a pretty easy shoot.
I think there was a ghost that just walked in the room right now.
What was that?
Or there was some
we all just
Paranormal activity.
I don't know if there's a creep in the house right now, folks, but we're hearing voices right now. This is officially turned from podcast to ghost hunters.
Like literally, like this is a random breeze blowing through the window. Like,
is the window open?
Yeah, let me go closer.
That probably scared everybody, right?
But I heard that little like
The zoom
yeah,
sound.
it's like the thing for a door.
We're about to
that
be
stops-
in our own Creepshow episode. No, I don't know what that was.
That'd be funny. That'd be funny for an episode. People talking about Creepshow, and then we're part of Creepshow.
Yeah,
That'd be like a fun like meta thing.
Fathers, I got my cat.
Okay, well, I think the poltergeist has officially left us. We've exercised it out the building, so now we can get back to our regularly scheduled programming. So you were saying, Jesus, that your favorite segment was the House of the Head.
Yeah. I don't know, there's something generally creepy about dolls. I mean, seriously. I think that there was like an effective jump scare where like they turned the page, and I recall that we all reacted to the same
It was
way.
just like, what's gonna happen?
They did it twice too with the page turn that I thought was like a good scare, but there was that one that was just like
It was at the end because you thought something was gonna happen with the dollhouse.
With
Well,
the head. Yeah.
And like
I don't know. Can we spoil stuff in this podcast?
Well, yeah, spoilers.
Well, I mean, you
Then
gotta let
spoil
people
it.
know that. Okay, because I mean, I think it's done in such a way. This is what this story has that the other ones don't have. It's building up to like a suspense. I guess you're expecting something really big to happen at the end because, you know, it's just like every time she adds a different doll, there's another. You know, I mean, they move on their own, obviously, and so as the story progresses, I mean, you get to see how the situation is getting worse and worse in the dollhouse. Every time she looks back, I mean, something has happened. Some doll has lost its head, or you know, well, mostly lost their heads, right? I mean, this thing just, I guess it's like a demonic entity that decapitates its victims or something. But I guess the progression of the story is that you feel like it's going to build up to something, and we're not aware of what exactly it's going to be. I mean, I had my theories, honestly, as I was watching it. I thought the father might have had something to do with it, just because, I mean, there's a scene where the father's just sitting down on the table, you know, counting his bills and stuff. I don't know what he was doing. But I don't know, there's just something eerie about the father that just kind of made me think like something, it's all going to come full circle with the dad. But I mean, obviously it never did.
Wait, the doll father or the
yeah,
real father?
like the father, the actual father.
Oh.
Yeah.
Like it was gonna have the parents in it. Oh yeah.
Well,
I
something.
guess
I mean, I feel like something. Like maybe it was like, you know how like Twilight Zone had like those crazy twists at the end. Maybe they are in the dollhouse themselves and stuff.
Yep.
Maybe. I mean, I kind of.
When she threw the head, I was like, oh, now it's gonna.
Now it's gonna.
That's
Now
what
they're
I
in
thought.
another dollhouse.
They're in it now.
Yeah. So that's
But
what I thought. But
I thought they were gonna end it darker though, and they were gonna show her like her real parents like what decapitated or something.
Right. That's what I thought. Yeah.
That would have been a little too dark, probably keeping in the previous Creepshow like fashion. Maybe that would have been a little too dark or
also
gory.
keep in mind this one was like the least goriest out of all
It
the
was,
four
but it was
stories
so
that we
scary.
saw.
True.
Purely suspense. I mean, that's all it is. Just suspense.
What was up with her giving the dollhouse to somebody else at the end? I felt like
know,
she
right?
should have just destroyed it.
Yeah.
She kind of just
Bro.
passed it on to someone else.
It's kind of like the crate. It's like rather than
That's
you know
true.
killing the monster or destroying the item, just throw it and hope to God it doesn't find its hands in anything, you know, anyone else.
I wonder if the writer of this episode, Josh Mallerman, was inspired by Hereditary. 'Cause
I know.
when it
Yeah,
popped
that
up, like,
cover.
what is this, Hereditary?
Yeah, it opens up like that. Wasn't Stephen King? I mean, I saw right here that Stephen King was also the writer on these two stories.
He was the story by for Gray Matter, the first
Oh,
episode.
okay, not this one.
Yeah, I think it was different writers for all the
Yeah.
other ones.
They could have. Yeah, I feel like there's definitely. I just feel like, well, in Hereditary, side note, Hereditary had that dolls, but that wasn't really a main part of the story. It was just like.
It had nothing to do with the story. It was
Yeah.
just like what the mother did.
But they
Yeah.
did have like the decapitated head. Yeah, in Hereditary. And I think she ended up like, you know, making a decapitated
scene.
head for the scene.
Yeah.
So it kind of reminded me of that. So I can imagine the writer being inspired by watching that film and those scenes and be like, what would happen if we set it all in a dollhouse and then the thing started moving and the little girl couldn't tell anybody and
Yeah, what I liked about like the episode was like with dolls, it's like saying so much, but by doing so little because it leaves it up to us.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, when the dolls start moving and it's like, okay, it's weird. The story's happening in this dollhouse. We only see it through her eyes, like the little girl. but like in my mind also like I was also picturing it like actually like a horror movie because it started out like a legit horror movie. Families attacked by some unknown spirit, unknown something, and throughout the house they're experiencing terror. And so it's like, oh, it's a whole. In my own mind, I imagined what was really going on, like
I think
live action of like of this figurine family. So that's what was pretty cool.
No, I think it's really effective because, I mean, it's allowing us to put the story together in our head. Yeah. It's not giving it to us. It's just, I think it's really smart about it. It's like letting us, the viewers, here's what we're showing you. You put together what the story's about. Because we don't know at the end, I mean, at all what the head is. I mean, it's just a fucking head, I guess.
Creepy
it's
head.
Yeah.
Which is like, I think like why like the page turner, when it went to the next segment,
you're so invested in it that it just catches you off guard.
Yeah, it catches you. And you're just surprised because you thought it's going to end more because I think our imaginations make it worse than it actually is.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So you're like, something's going to happen. And you're like, oh, just a page turner. Oh, okay. Because, I was like...
But seeing
Those
the
are
head in the
filmmakers.
mirror,
That's how you do an effective jump scare.
seeing the head in the mirror though was slightly scary though. Just like like screaming and looking in the mirror.
Yeah.
And then you could see the chief, which was from the Creepshow.
Yeah, it seemed like the Chief Woodenhead figurine that they put in there was a throwback to that. And I also noticed the ashtray from the Father's Day segment in the original one too. And
there's a lot of Easter eggs in there.
A lot of Easter eggs. Yeah.
The Shining carpet was a piece of carpet underneath like the dining table or the living room table.
In the dollhouse.
Yeah, in the dollhouse. So I was like, oh, that was so cool. I saw that.
Lots of cool little Easter eggs thrown in there.
That's what I think is cool is like they're fans of the people of Creepshow are fans of horror, so it's like, you know, they invest into it, so it makes it fun. So
they're gonna pick up on it and appreciate it.
Yeah, so like the fans are gonna really, really love it.
I think Gray Matters was kind of an homage to the first Creepshow, right? Where Stephen King gets infected with this like green.
I felt like it was a little bit,
kind of a little bit, right?
Just kind of all the nasty, gross stuff, and just like the
gross.
wet, like whatever. You know how it was all gooey. I definitely thought they seemed like kind of similar.
I think I remember reading that short story. I don't know if it was from Skeleton Crew, the book that Stephen King put out, but out of the episodes, I really liked Gray Matter the most and Bad Wolf Down. I thought Gray Matter started kind of slow, but once it started building up, it really got into the mood and the kind of style that the show had. And especially with Bad Wolf Down, the whole werewolf thing, and then the twist at the end, and of course the photography with the changing lights, going from regular lighting to throwing in like a green or a red, and then the whole comic book motif where they had, you know, kind of drawn in things, you know, in the frame.
That was dope.
And then just, you know, through the whole series, kind of going from different pages and different columns and cells of comics and going from one to the other and kind of doing split screen on some things. They really lived up to the whole aesthetic and style of the series, and I really like that.
I definitely agree with the... Instead of like spending money to do the whole showing them changing into the werewolves, they can kind of just do that through the comic book.
Yeah.
It still looked really dope how they did it. Like it didn't make you feel like, oh, they just, you know, went the cheap way, even though I mean they did. But it looked we ran out of budget, but it looked dope the way
it was really
did
effective. It was really effective how they did it.
I think, I mean, this is kind of a note to like teach like filmmakers that you don't need a lot of money to make an effective, horrifying scene. The way I saw the Dollhouse segment was that they each had a cut, and I think whoever the prop master was, they probably just moved the dolls like a little bit, you know, in between scenes, and I think like it's made so easily, but it's so effective.
So simple yet so effective.
Simple, yet so effective, yeah.
Yeah, with Gray Matter, I mean, like, I really enjoyed like the sliminess of it all.
Oh, it was great.
Just the sliminess of the creature. It became, because like we don't know what it was. It was just like a thing that split into like 5 different things that were still united.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, no, but it seemed like it was going to expand exponentially, right? Which is with the calculations that
like the more people it absorbed, and the bigger it was going to become. And Adrienne Barbeau at the end, she was like typing it in. You're kind of like wondering, what is she typing?
Yeah.
She's
That
like,
was kind of confusing.
I was like, is she going to get
Yeah.
her money right? What's going on?
Yeah. Why is she doing finances
My
right
word.
now?
it's not the time, Adrienne.
So that was one that was like a little unclear, but I was like, oh, okay. Then after I was like, they were talking about it, I was like, oh, okay. It's
6
gonna
days?
grow.
6 days for what? Until the end, until it takes over.
And
I like that
after
part.
Yeah, that was good.
And then it took the guy at the end, and it's like, okay,
Yeah.
it's a wrap.
So I think that was like the climax of the whole little story then. Because I mean, like she said, at first you just see this slimy creature and he's like splitting, and it's scary, but I don't know, just at the end when she's like frantically typing on her little calculator, like that kind of was like the climax. Like, oh shoot, like it's just going to keep growing and it's going to take over, and to the midst of a hurricane, and everything is just going to shit.
Took on a bigger scope.
It did.
Than just a small
like
town
that last
thing.
little like couple of minutes there too.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the suspense started when they first entered the apartment. Like, I know the son's explaining to the woman in the is it the diner?
Yeah, in the diner or whatever it
diner,
is.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, convenience store / diner. When he's explaining to her like about what's happening with his life, like it's suspenseful. Like we're trying to do suspense with him, the son like narrating it, but it really doesn't pick up till you see the sheriff, and then I don't know what
Who was the other guy? I don't know, but
I mean, like I know their names, and I know like where they've been, like the stuff they've been a part of. I just can't remember the characters in there, but the sheriff and then the other guy, like walking into the apartment and then finally making these like going in, you know something's up because they saw the door on the first floor of the house.
the slime.
So
Right.
It's like. But it shit like starts picking up there, but for me it really picks up when they enter the house, and then they do a good job. I like seeing those two together because they're also good actors.
They are.
So it's like seeing them like really like got me like, ooh, something's coming. Like I can't remember his name.
Tobin Bell
Tobin
was one of them, the Jigsaw from the Saw films, and then the other actor was, I don't know his name, but he was in Breaking Bad.
Gus Fring.
Oh, that was a guy.
Yeah, that's his biggest thing.
Okay.
Los Pollos Hermanos.
Is that the actor's name? What's his name?
I don't know his name, but I just know him as Gus Fring from Breaking Bad.
Yeah. I mean, he's been in other stuff, but that's.
And then they had Adrian Barbeau in that episode. That was a really great one to start off with. I thought that was really great. I didn't really get into the story until he started, kind of talking about his father and then him being an alcoholic and then just kind of barreling downwards toward this dark spiral. I don't know. It just started growing on me a little bit. No pun intended.
Yeah, it just for me it was just a little slow. I enjoyed it, but it was just a little slow. But it was definitely like I think definitely a good payoff. Like I was definitely like, okay, yeah, we needed to go. I'm good with it. And like it justifies it going slow because you have to do the show the progression of the dad slowly changing.
Right.
But it's also like the son didn't have any questions. Like he was okay with his dad.
Yeah.
Like I get it. Like
Yeah.
I get it's the thing. But I was like, you saw your dad and you're like not like dad. Like I think I don't know. Maybe it was the son. Maybe there could have been more expression from him when the dad had like the gray stuff on his face. Like
Right.
your dad doesn't look
A
like
little bit more
that.
worried or
Yeah.
questioning of it.
Maybe that's the thing why I didn't really feel it because maybe he wasn't so like worried.
I guess at the end they just show him as being like really naive and maybe damaged himself. He's like, he told me he was gonna change. I love my dad, and it's like, well, his mom already died.
He was so damaged from his
He was
mom
just rolling
dying.
with the
and-
punches.
Exactly,
like,
yeah.
He wasn't asking no questions, even though like his dad is like half of his side is going black with like mold or whatever
Yeah.
that was.
I don't know. Maybe just like that kid's performance was like. I wish it could have
Little
been a
dull,
little more.
Just wasn't feeling it so much.
Yeah, I feel like it was there, but I was like, why wasn't I into it too much? And it was, I think it was him, because I feel like if he was like maybe crying a little more,
Yeah.
or something, like showing really struggling to tell the story of his dad, I would have been like, oh, what's really going on with his dad? Like, what's up?
Right.
But I feel like just him out of all of it probably fell a little flat for me, and he was a good portion of the story.
He
That's
was.
true.
He's the narrator
And I-
for it, so
I think it took a while to make the reveal. Like half the time, like his dad is just like a drunk, okay, he's falling all over the place, whatever. Yeah. But it was like, okay, I think they took a while to get to the point of his dad really changing into whatever the monster. I don't know. I think they could have maybe did that a little quicker.
I like how they didn't have to explain exactly what was changing him and how he got infected. You just kind of know that he was changing and something was going bad. And, oh, crap, now he's eating people. And these, the story kind of paralleled between him telling the story and the guys
It
going to
did.
the house. And I felt like you kind of get more invested the more you found out and wanted to know what was going to happen to these guys. That's
I was going to say, I mean, I think the appeal of pretty much all the segments is that we don't necessarily get answers to anything. It's just a story and just a scenario, what's going on in it. I mean, we don't really know exactly what's going on with the dollhouse. I mean,
Right.
where the fuck that one werewolf girl originated from.
Exactly.
Or, even the monster in the fourth one. What do you call the monster at the end? He named it
Bob.
Bob,
Oh,
yeah.
Bob.
We don't know what the fuck Bob is.
Bob.
But yeah, it's just, I mean, in the spirit of, I guess, the original two films, I mean, we have these situations where just random, like, crazy ass shit just happens to people out of nowhere. I mean, we don't question it. We just, enjoy watching it, yeah.
yeah.
And you only have so much time in order to tell these stories.
Yeah.
It's
Which is why S was a good movie. Just saying, Jeremy.
cutting that part out of the show. Jesus.
That's plot holes, but still good.
Plot holes. Plot holes for days. It's okay though. But so they had some other great guest stars on the show, such as Jeffrey Combs in the werewolf episode. It was good seeing him as the Nazi lieutenant guy who lost his son. And then the actor who was in the episode The Finger was Donald Joseph Qualls, who you guys might recognize from Road Trip, the new guy, Hustle and Flow. Also starred in Breaking Bad.
And
Yeah.
Supernatural.
And Supernatural, yes.
And
And apparently some other guests that are going to be on the show include Big Boy from Outkast and Kid Cudi.
Okay.
oh, I think Kid Cudi was Bad Wolf Down. He was the
Was that him?
guy who was speaking German. That was him.
Oh, French, right? Was it French?
Oh, that was Kid Cudi? It was French. He was speaking
Get
French.
out of here.
Yeah,
Really?
I don't know my languages. Yeah, that was him. I was
I didn't
like,
even
he looks
know that.
familiar.
Oh, I didn't even.
Because I thought he looked like
recognize.
another black actor that I was like, oh, that looks like him, but I wasn't sure. But I was like, okay. Then you said Kid Cudi. I was like, oh, that's him, because he had a familiar face.
I didn't even
I just didn't know where to
notice
put it.
Oh,
That's
I had
him
no
now.
idea.
Yeah, so I was like, he's famous. I just don't know where. And then now you said Kid Cudi. I was like, that makes sense.
Wow. Apparently, they're going to have David Arquette in a future episode, as well as Dana Gould and some other guests. So it should be cool. I love the series so far. I think they're off to a great start. I can't wait to see the rest of the episodes. And I would really love to see a season 2. Do you guys agree? Season 2?
Definitely season 2.
Yeah.
They actually had a Horror Nights maze at Universal this year that included not only the Creepshow film, but also the television show. And our very own Jesus Pinedo went inside. What was your reaction to the maze over there at Universal?
Oh, I loved it, man. I think every year, Universal makes an attempt to, make something that horror fans will really love, and I feel like Creepshow was the maze this year. They did pretty much all the stories from the first movie, and I believe that the only one that I recalled, because I hadn't seen the show prior to today, obviously, and so they did the first story. I believe they did like a second
Gray
maze.
matter.
Yeah, because they have all this like gooey stuff. You're basically walking through the house. And yeah, it was pretty scary.
Cool.
That sounds fun.
Then the monster just pops out of nowhere, and then just like, oh shit. I got scared, but I had no idea what it was. Now I know. Yeah. But yeah, really great maze, honestly. I recommend that if you love horror, go to Universal Horror Nights.
Hey.
This is
Need
not
money, Universal.
sponsored.
All right.
Unless they want to give us tickets,
No,
then we
right.
will sponsor them.
Yeah.
Get some more subscribers first. Hit that like and subscribe button.
Hey.
So I guess some future episodes, at least one of them is going to be written by Joe Hill, who, if you don't know, is Stephen King's son, who actually starred in the original Creepshow film as the kid who was reading the comics, and his dad, Tom Atkins, was the one scolding him for reading the horror comics, and then he ended up getting the voodoo doll. So yeah, that was Stephen King's son. He's now a horror writer named Joe Hill, and the story in the 5th episode is going to be by him, and it's going to be directed by horror meister Tom Savini.
Ooh, nice.
So that ought to be a fun one to watch. That one's called By the Silver Water of Lake Chamberlain. And I think it's safe to say that the show's in good hands. It's show ran by Greg Nicotero, who, in case you didn't know, was on the set of the original Creepshow film. He was invited on set by director George Romero, and obviously it stuck, and he later worked on a lot of films, including Day of the Dead, Dawn of the Dead, etc., etc. And I think he really has the tone and the whole style of the film, of the series, kind of nailed down. So I'm really excited to see what he comes up with next. Any closing things you guys want to talk about on the show? Any particular moments you liked?
The critter kind of looked like Alien, like a little
know,
mini
right?
albino
It
alien.
reminded me of like the alien rendition from Spaceballs, Remember in Spaceballs where it pops out and he puts on the top edge like, hello, my darling, hello, my honey. It reminded me of that a little bit in terms of the design. But that story went in a totally different direction from what I was expecting it to.
I didn't expect it to go that
It went very comedic. He was breaking the fourth wall, and then by the end you weren't really sure if what he was telling was true or not.
Exactly. Yeah, I like the breaking the fourth wall, and then, just his sarcastic humor, and then like when he's talking to the police and he shuts the door in his face, and then he turns to the camera and starts talking.
This went on for another 20 minutes.
Yeah, that was really good. A different change. Than
Absolutely.
The other ones.
Yeah, I just like the relationship between him and Bob. He really grew to love Bob. It's like, oh, Bob likes to do this and eat popcorn and watch these novellas or these stories.
Yeah.
He just really knowing his habits. They became roommates for some point.
They did, they were best friends, and you kind of feel bad for Bob because he's like a little, like a dog, but he kills people and he rips their testicles off, and because he loves his owner so much, though.
Yeah, so that's interesting though. It's interesting that he slept in the fridge or
He
a
slept
freezer.
in the freezer, yeah.
Freezer and purred.
And purred, yeah.
Like a cat.
Yeah.
And would bring home gifts of the people that he killed. He brought home the heart of his ex-wife.
Yeah.
He brought home the head of his stepchildren. He brought over the balls of some guy who almost ran him over with his truck.
But yeah, I like the scene how he gets caught. He brings the heads, and it's like, okay, yeah, he can throw some testicles down the garbage disposal, and even a heart, he can get rid of that. But how is he gonna get rid of these heads? Because like he said, if he threw them in the ocean, in Pacific Ocean, Bob is gonna somehow
fetch
find
him
it and bring it back. So he's bashing the heads in, and then you see the police pull up, and you're like, But the whole time, I'm like, I listen to too many true crime podcasts where they find the criminals because they left DNA behind, and he's just like splashing the blood
All over the
walls and,
place.
like, touching the light switches and everything with his bloody hands, just like getting evidence everywhere.
Yeah, he's really, really messy. Like, wow, you're gonna do that?
Come
like
on,
that?
guy.
Okay.
Get it together.
I mean, I haven't really butchered any bodies, but if I did, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be doing it that way because that was just.
Now, what are you guys' opinions? Do you think that he was imagining Bob the whole time, or do you think Bob was a real creature that he grew from a finger?
Real creature, I think.
Real creature?
Yeah, because, like, why? Why would it be imaginary? Like...
Well, I mean, they do end it with him at the mental institution.
He's in a mental institution. He's talking. I felt like that kind of scene kind of dragged on a little bit. They could have cut like a minute or two off of there.
But doesn't that kind of go back to... Can't think of the name right now, but the Creepshow 1, the guy who was really clean with the cockroaches, didn't it make it seem like he was maybe just crazy and he was imagining the cockroaches?
Right.
Being
That
there?
dude didn't. I mean, legitimately, I mean, there were cockroaches in his apartment. I mean, he's the ending where they come out his neck, right? I mean, there's no.
Yeah, they crawl inside of him, and then he ends up
Yeah.
dying. Yeah, but I think they might have given some hint that maybe he was just
He was, like,
tripping,
crazy or
and
something,
because he was a real cleanly guy.
No, I'd like to think that it's real, because then it's like, it just makes it...
Otherwise, it's just more like a psychological
Yeah.
story as opposed to like a monster creep show sort of thing.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
Creepshow, man. This is.
It's creep show. You got to have monsters in it.
Yeah, I feel like, yeah.
You don't
they're-
imagine things here.
Yeah, I mean, I get, like, you imagine some things, but, like, having... And that means none of it was real. Bob wasn't real? Like,
Yeah.
what we
That's just so
watched
sad.
wasn't real? Like,
I like to
everything...
think Bob was real.
We all want to
I
think
think
Bob
Bob was real.
But that's because sad, because
We
what
all want
happens
our
to
own
Bob
Bobs.
afterwards?
You're my
Yeah.
Bob,
You
Jesus.
know?
But what did you
Oh,
say?
you
You
want me
said
to
you
kill for
thought it was...
You better.
You
What's
said
that?
you thought he was crazy, right?
I thought he was crazy at the end. Yeah.
Okay.
I felt like he was crazy, but just because of the nature of the show, I feel like you kind of got to lean a little bit more towards it being real and it was a creature. Otherwise, it's just more psychological territory and a little bit more Twilight Zone-ish, which I don't feel like the show is really
Yeah.
about.
Yeah, because I feel like they just pull one out from under. It's like, just kidding, it's not real. And it's like, what?
Yeah.
Why'd you take us along this journey then? Like,
It's pulling April Fool's Day on us. It's like the April Fool's Day movie. Nope, nobody died. Leaves the viewer feeling very unsatisfied.
Yeah.
Can we all have a Bob in our life? I'm going to go out right now tonight and search for some severed fingers in the street. I don't know about you guys. I'm going to feed it some beer. I'm going to put it in the freezer in a little butter container, and I'm going to hope that it grows.
Well, we are in the valley, so likely you probably will find one.
Probably won't be hard. Probably won't be hard at all.
Yeah.
Just got to go over to the Van Nuys area.
Oh yeah.
Take
Right.
5 minutes.
Yeah.
Come up right up with one. So actually, we last weekend we watched some Tales from the Crypt, and I'm just wondering what you guys feel about the Tales from the Crypt television show compared to this Creepshow television show. I know they're kind of vastly different in terms of when they came out and the format. That was a half hour. This is a little bit more closer to an hour. But what do you guys like more so far? Tales from the Crypt, the classic HBO television show, or Creepshow, the new Shudder 2019 show? Let's get your thoughts on it, Vicky.
I would have to say just Creepshow now, just because it's still able to tell that type of story, like that's themed from like the 80s successfully.
Yeah.
And again, it's not being fair to Tales from the Crypt because again, it hasn't gotten a shot to be revived.
Exactly.
But I feel like if they were both existent, it'd be really hard to pick. But I would go with Creepshow just because it still hits. It's still good. Like you're still entertained, you're still involved. Tales from the Crypt still hits too, even though it's how old is it? 10 years? 20 years?
At least 20 years. Yeah, I think the last one came out in the late 90s, early 90s.
I mean, it still holds up, but I just feel like it still holds up for its time. But there's a lot of things that still hold up for its time. But like something that you have to bring it back, and if you're unsure if it's gonna be in good hands, if it's gonna be done well. I think Creepshow definitely right now is to me is better.
And I think Creepshow embraces more of the comic book format style than Tales from the Crypt did. Of course, he would introduce it with the comic book, but that was the kind of only time that you saw it. Whereas in Creepshow, they kind of go from different panels. They do the page turning. You know, they might even go to some animation at points.
Yeah.
So, but they are cousins of each other because they're both based on the EC classic comic book series.
Yeah, I guess I would go with another thing thank you for pointing that out was like again the comics is like it. Switching from live action to the comics definitely keeps the viewer entertained.
Yeah, definitely separates it from other stuff.
It definitely keeps you on your toes of like, hey, we could switch to this and live action, and we could switch to this comic book format.
Right.
So that's another factor that I would definitely give Creepshow a little bit more of
an
they
edge.
Incorporate their own creation from where they started into their actual live action movie.
I agree. I like that.
Yeah.
Jesus, what do you think? Tales from the Crypt or Creepshow?
Well, I mean, I think it's a bit too soon to say after all. I mean, Tales of the Crypt has like 8 or 7 seasons, I believe.
7 seasons.
And
7 seasons.
two
And 3 movies.
3 movies or 2?
Two official
Oh, yeah.
studio releases, 1
That's
straight to
okay.
DVD. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, too soon to say. I mean, they're both based off Easy Comics, so I mean, both of them are like an homage to the Easy Comics and such. But
They're cousins, sisters of each other. They're in the same
pretty
family.
much, they're an influence to each other in a way. I'd love to see what would happen if they were to reboot Tales of the Crypt. I mean, I hope that happens one day.
Yeah, I
I mean,
hope so.
With the success of this, hopefully the success of this series and the Twilight Zone, I mean, we'll see, a revamped version of it. But yeah, they're both in the same spirit. I mean, they have this cheesy horror vibe with a lot of gore, practical effects, and black comedy and stuff.
Yeah.
Creepshow could use more puns, I guess.
I think leave the puns to the Crypt Keeper, and I think Tales from the Crypt plays up a little bit more of the sexiness as well, because it was HBO, it was the 90s, so they like to throw a few boobs here and there, a little bit more making out, stuff like that. Whereas Creepshow is a little bit more centered around monsters and scares and things like that.
Creepshow's more family friendly. Tales from the Crypt not so family friendly.
Yeah, Tales from the Crypt might
good
lean a
time
little
with
bit
your
more
family.
towards like revenge sort of things, stilted lovers. It might lean a little bit more towards the thriller side with a little bit more of a monster aspect, whereas Creepshow is just totally monster aspect. Estella, you've seen both shows. What do you think?
Creepshow.
Still in Creepshow
Not
so far.
definitely,
Okay.
but Creepshow, yeah. And I didn't know them. I didn't know that they were cousins based on the comic that you just said. But I would get them confused because you're saying like, okay, we're gonna watch Creepshow tonight. I'm like, wait, Tales from the Crypt? Didn't we watch that last week? So I was getting confused. But yeah, like the Crypt Keeper is a little bit more like cheesy, his like high pitched voice and
Right.
little like cackle, whereas this one is a little bit more. I don't know. It's not gore, but I don't know what the word I'm looking for. A little bit more horror than like you said. Tales from the Crypt can kind of be like just about revenge and like stuff in general, but not necessarily creepy like Creepshow.
Well, I really love the show. I was really excited about it. I can't wait to watch the rest of the episodes. I hope we all get to watch them together. There's 2 more out right now. Go ahead and subscribe to Shudder and check it out. And I'd like to thank you guys for being on the podcast today. Stella, podcast enthusiast, thank you so much. Victoria? I'm not Victoria. I'm sorry. You don't like being called Victoria.
Please keep that in. It's fine. It's fine. Happens all the time. It's okay.
Vicky, the average achiever. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Don't call her Victoria. Hey, Zeus, thank you so much for your assistance on the audio today and watching this wonderful show. I know it was hard stopping yourself from watching it and waiting until today, so thank you for doing that.
Thank you for having me.
I've been your host, JP. Don't forget to check out the other episodes of our podcast and click that like and subscribe button to show your support. As always, stay cheesy, and remember, there's nothing to fear but film itself.
Meteor ship!